Wonderful. Welcome to meeting number 18 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Fisheries and Oceans. Pursuant to Standing Order 1082 and the motion adopted on February 1st, 2022, the committee is commencing its study of science at the Department of Fisheries and Oceans. This meeting is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to House Order of November 25th, 2021. As per the Directive of Board of Internal Economy on March 10, 2022, all those attending the meeting in person must wear a mask except for members who are at their place during the proceedings of the meeting. For those participating by video conference, when you're ready to speak, please click the icon to activate your mic, and please speak slowly and clearly. When you are not speaking, your mic should be on mute. For interpretation, you have the choice at the bottom of your screen of either floor, English, or French. I'll remind everyone that all comments should be addressed to the chair. I'd now like to welcome our witnesses from the department for the first panel today. We have from the Department of Fisheries and Oceans, Bernard Vignot, Director General, Ecosystem Science Directorate, Christina Worcester, Director, Strategic Science Planning and Programme Integrity, Matthew Hardy, Regional Director, Science Gulf Region, Andrew Thompson, Regional Director, Science Pacific Region, Christy Miller-Saunders, Senior Research Scientist, Judith LeBlanc, Science Advisor. Mr. Vignot, you have the floor for 5 minutes for opening statements, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the opportunity to discuss with you the science conducts at Fisheries and Ocean. Je suis le directeur général.
I'm the Director General responsible for ecosystem science, which includes environment and ecosystems, ocean and climate, fisheries, and marine mammal science.
My colleague from the science sector, representing a broad range of departmental scientific expertise and our geographic footprint across the country. I would like to present Andrew Thompson, Regional Director of Science, Pacific Region, who is responsible for scientific program in Pacific, in the British Columbia and Yukon. Matthew Hardy, Regional Director of Science for Gulf Region, who is responsible for DFO science activity in the Southern Gulf of the St. Lawrence. Tana Worcester, Director, Strategic Science Planning and Program Integrity in Maritimes Region, who leads Canadian Science Advice Secretariat Process and Science Planning. Judith LeBlanc, conseillère scientifique basée à Québec.
Scientific advisor based in Quebec, who works in the National Consultation Group on Contaminants.
Founders research scientist at the Pacific Region, who conducts genetics and genomic research on salmon in BC. Fisheries and Ocean Canada relies on strong and vibrant science sector. Each year, DFO sector mobilizes teams of research scientists, biologists, and technicians to conduct field and laboratory studies for hundreds of distinct projects in marine and freshwater systems. This results in a wealth of knowledge about our ecosystem and fish population to support the departmental decision-making. The science sector has expertise in a wide range of fields, including marine environment, aquatic ecosystem, hydrography, oceanography, fisheries, aquaculture, and biotechnology. DFO science is made up of science professionals located in research institute, laboratories, experimental centers, and offices across the country. Science staff collect data, conducts research and monitoring activity, whose results contribute to the science advice that can be used to answer specific questions or inform decisions. As a science-based department, scientific integrity is essential to the work of the department and its employee. Scientific integrity is critical to the decision-making progress from planning and conduct of research to the production of advice and application of advice. Departmental scientists are bound by the codes of values and ethics and our science integrity policy, who reinforce principles like transparency, science excellence, and ensuring high standard of research ethics. DFO generates science advice in a transparent way using the Canadian Science Advisory Secretariat, which is based on the principles of evidence-based peer review. Participants in the peer review process participate as objective experts to complete the peer review of the science under consideration. To guide participation, DFO has published a conflict of interest policy and a policy on participation at CSAS meeting. Peer review is a vital component of the important challenge function that DFO sector provide, and its review have included domestic, international, scientists, experts from government, academia, indigenous community, NGOs, and industry experts. The objective of the peer review meeting is to provide sound, objective, and impartial science information and advice. The results of these peer review and the supporting analysis are published on the DFO website. These scientific analyses inform departmental decision-making and provide Canadians with the scientific analysis and advice generated by departmental science staff. DFO also supports open science and as an action plan and continue to publish data sets through the open government portals. All DFO science reports are open and accessible. DFO Science works with a range of partners with undertaking its research activities. Our research and staff collaborate with scientists from other government departments, university, indigenous community, environmental organization, as well as members of the industry. Collaboration contributes expertise, knowledge, analysis, data, samples, and platforms. These collaborations contribute to science excellence within our department, extend the breadth of the expertise and that we have access to, and demonstrate Canadian leadership internationally, and helps to inform the sound and credible science basis for decision making. Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you for that. It was a little under time, so we'll go now to our rounds of questioning. We'll start off for 6 minutes or less with Mr. Perkins.
I just want to start my timer so I can keep track. Thank you, witnesses, and thank you for agreeing to start off this very important study that was initiated by my colleague Mel Arnold. My first question, and it's I'm a little unsure of who to direct it to, Mr. Chair. We usually like to direct it to a witness, so I'm not sure specifically of everyone's responsibility. So maybe the first question I can address to Mr. Vigneault and perhaps Mr. Thompson. In financial data provided to me by DFO, I see that since 2016, the amount of money that has been allocated or increased in the science budget on fishery science has gone up 36%. I think we think that's a good thing. But on the oceans and climate change side of the department, it's basically almost double that at 64%. So Mr. Vigneault or Mr. Miller, can you tell me how the department made the decision to split the additional new money between those two areas?
Yes, thank you very much. The question, Mr. Chair. So those, the member is right. Funding has increased over the recent years with the targeted investment both in fishery science and climate change. There are budget allocations that are made through the department through program proposal. For instance, for fishery science in 2018, there was an investment that was specific to the implementation of the Fisheries Act that provide additional investment in science to support the development of the fish stock provision, in particular additional funding to do field work and collect data for species where there was limitation for us to develop the precautionary approach. Similarly, funding was received specifically for climate change adaptation. So in budget 2018, we received the funding for the aquatic adaptation service program, which has ongoing funding to help us look at, for example, fish stock vulnerability to climate change. So basically, the additional amounts that we receive are bound with the what has been developed and approved in terms of program proposal. I will turn to my colleague, Mr. Thompson, if he wants.
I'm short on time, sorry. Thank you very much.
For technical, there's some technical trouble. So.
I can start over, or you like to speak?
All right, I've been told we're back and up and running, and I apologise for the delay. This modern age of technology that we live in today, and everybody is so dependent on it in more ways than one. But we are going to see, the clerk is going to check and see if we can add the time on at the end. So we're going to start from the beginning, because apparently nothing was actually captured for Pearl View, and I hope the witnesses have the time to stay with us, and I would, if possible, I'll ask Mr. Vigneault to start off again with his opening statement, so as it will be captured or recorded or there for somebody to look at sometime down the road if they're interested. But again, we'll start off from the top, if that's okay with everyone, and we'll go on from there. When
Thank
you're
you
ready.
very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the opportunity to discuss the science conducted by Fisheries and Ocean Canada. Je suis le directeur général des sciences des écosystèmes qui chapeaute les activités scientifiques liées à l'environnement et aux écosystèmes, les océans et le climat, les pêches et les mammifères marins. I'm joined today by my colleagues from the science sector representing a broad range of departmental scientific expertise and our geographic footprint across Canada. I would like to present Andrew Thompson, Regional Director of Science Pacific Region, who's responsible for the science activities in British Columbia and Yukon. Mr. Matthew Hardy, Regional Director, Gulf Region, who's responsible for the science program within the Southern Gulf of St. Lawrence. Tana Worcester, Director, Strategic Science Planning and Program Integrity in Maritimes Region, who leads Canadian Science Advice Secretariat processes and science planning. Judith Leblanc, conseillère.
Judith Leblanc, Scientific Advisor from the Quebec region, who works in the National Advisory Group on Contaminants.
Saunders, Research Scientist, DFO Pacific, who conducts genetics and genomic research on salmon in BC. Fisheries and Ocean Canada relies on strong and vibrant science sector. Each year, DFO Science mobilize teams of research scientists, biologists, and technicians to conduct field and laboratory studies for hundreds of distinct projects in marine and freshwater systems. This results in a wealth of knowledge about our ecosystem and fish populations to support the departmental decision-making. The science sector has expertise in a wide range of fields, including marine environment and aquatic ecosystem, hydrography, oceanography, fisheries, aquaculture, and biotechnology. The FO Science is made up of science professionals located at research institute, laboratory, experimental centers, and office across the country. Science staff collect data and conduct research and monitoring activity whose results contribute to the science advice that can be used to answer specific questions or to inform a decision. As a science-based department, science integrity is essential to the work of the department and of its employee. Science integrity is critical to the decision-making process from the planning and conduct of research to the production of advice and application of advice. Departmental scientists are bound by our Code of Ethic value and the Science Integrity Policy, which reinforce principles like transparency, scientific excellence, and ensuring high standard of research ethics. DFO generates science advice in a transparent way using the Canadian Science Advisory Secretariat, which is based on the principle of evidence-based peer review. Participants in peer review process participate as objective experts to complete the peer review of the science under consideration. To guide participation, DFO has published a conflict of interest policy and a policy on participation for the CSAS meeting. Peer review is a vital component of the important challenge function that DFO sectors provide, and its reviews have included domestic and international scientific experts from government, academia, indigenous communities, environmental non-governmental organizations, and industry experts. The objective of the peer review meeting is to provide sound, objective, and impartial science information and advice. The results of these peer review and the supporting analysis are published on the department website. These scientific analysis inform departmental decision-making and provide Canadians with the scientific analysis and advice generated by the departmental science staff. DFO also supports open science as an action plan and continue to publish data, including to the open governmental data portals. All DFO science reports are open and accessible. DFO Science works with a range of partners when undertaking its research activity. Our research and staff collaborate with scientists from other government departments, universities, indigenous communities, environmental organizations, as well as members of the industry. Collaboration contributes expertise, knowledge, analysis, data samples, and platforms. Those collaborations contribute to scientific excellence within our department, expand the breadth of our expertise we have access to, demonstrate Canadian leadership internationally, and helps to inform the sound and credible science basis for decision making. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you for that, and we'll go back to Mr. Perkins, almost like a rewind, for your 6 minutes or less, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I might start a little differently this time, just to ask witnesses if they could, because we all have limited time, to try and keep your answers as brief as possible for all sides. I'd like to start off, and I don't know if it's Mr. Vigneault that I should ask it to or not, so I'll ask the question. When the minister is presented with decisions to make with regard to the status of a stock, the status of a quota, whether it should be up or down, or in the case of Atlantic mackerel, suspended or eliminated, is the minister always presented with science for every single option?
So thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question. The short answer is yes. So we provide systematically science advice to support the memo for decision for the minister. The science advice is directly based on the peer-reviewed meetings that we conduct ahead of the process that leads to the decision.
Thank you. And does the minister often ask questions around the details of that science, when it was conducted, what the trends are? Does the minister get into that kind of detail?
Yes, generally speaking, we offer a range of information from the science sector to support the decision. That includes briefing as and when requested. That include the specific subsection of the briefing material that relates to the science advice.
Seen in the Discovery Island court ruling last Friday that the minister chose an option that was not one of the 4 options put forward by the department. How often does the minister choose an option that was not an option put forward by the department?
Go ahead, Bernard.
Yeah, the minister has a full authority over the fisheries decision. What is provided to her is the science that's based in part with the best advice that has been peer-reviewed and available to hand. So, but the decision is in the minister has full authority to do the decisions.
Thank you. I may come back to some of those questions if I have time. Ms. LeBlanc, in your letter in November to the Deputy Minister, you stated that the senior officials in the department altered your recommendation before it went to the Deputy Minister. How often have you experienced, or the scientists that you represent experienced, your work being altered by senior members of the department or the Minister's office?
Merci pour la question.
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. I signed the letter that the member mentioned, but it was not as a scientific advisor for the department, but as a delegate for the union and member of the consultation team representing the Professional Association of the Public Service. Out of respect for the process that is ongoing with the department, and because it's outside of my responsibilities as advisor, they would like to keep exchanges with the department private in order to resolve matters. Thank you.
Well, a big part of our study here is to understand how often and what the process is that the department minister used in the decision-making process. So I think it's incumbent before a parliamentary committee for officials to actually comment when their letters have been made public about how often alterations are made by senior officials. So perhaps we can come back to the Ms. LeBlanc or any of the other members. How are you? Is it regularly presented as part of the science?
Président, j'ai pas de traduction.
Apologies, I wasn't receiving interpretation.
Okay.
We'll ask for that to get checked. We'll just suspend for a moment and see if it's okay. So it's okay now? Okay, perfect. That was quick.
That was quick. Mr. Chair, I'm not sure which witness can answer this question. When the maybe it's Mr. Vigneault, when the recommendations go to the minister, does it contain on any species and the actions that are required, does it contain information about what the experience of the fishing community is and how they're experiencing the particular issue with regard to the species?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question. Obviously, I can reply just in general term as I'm responsible for the science input with the process, but along with the science inputs, all other inputs received through the consultation, not only to the official fisheries management advisory meetings, are summarized and provided for decision making. Yes.
Thank you. Well, in a particular case,
Actually, Mr. Perkins, there's about 11 seconds left, hardly time to get in a question or any sort of an answer.
Thank you, witnesses.
I will ask Mr. Vigneault if you could raise your mic a little bit. They're having trouble hearing. They're getting some cracking sounds through the mic, and it's hard on the interpreter's ears. So if you could do that, it'd be great. We'll now go to Mr. Cormier for 6 minutes or less, please.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Merci.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to all the witnesses for being with us today. It's important for Canadians to be able to trust science, and it's also our responsibility to ask questions to see how you assess stocks and how your decisions are made. In the past 2 weeks, for example, there were decisions made that impact my region, closing different fisheries in my region and a quota on shrimp, for example. For herring, for example, there was a decline of that resource, but what I would like to know is how you make a decision on closing fishing. How do you collect data, and when are you able to say, well, this is what's going on, we're closing the fishery of that species right now? I think Mr. Hardy would be the right person to answer this, so please answer the question.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the members for that question. For that species, we assess the stock with different indicators. Some data comes from fishermen themselves. We do different scientific analyses. We have samples as well. And this is the scientific basis that we use to develop an analysis and to understand the abundance of the stock and the composition of the stock. In the case of herring, we have noted there's a decrease in the size at maturity. So that's an indication that the stock is not in good shape. You talked about samples, so you also use those samples to reopen fishing, correct? Herring is currently closed. Are you doing samples on the resource to see if it's currently present? Are you on the water currently, or are you only in your offices analyzing the situation? What are you currently doing? Answer. I'm hearing myself. Okay, perfect. So, I'm hearing myself again. Okay, so for sampling currently, we are collaborating with industry. We do have ships. We will have ships at sea shortly. But we receive different information to assess stock. But to respond to your question specifically, we receive information from industry, and that is important in a lot of our assessments. So, as you know, herring is close to our shores. Nobody is currently on the water doing scientific analysis. I hope that you will look into that. I would like to now move on to shrimp. an important decrease in the past few years. What is your estimation of biomass in tons of shrimp, of prawn? Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question. For shrimp, we look at data, but we don't have data on biomass specifically. This is data that we've had for years to establish a system of precaution for that species. And what does that represent? Do you have a number in tons, or? I do not have those numbers in front of me. We are looking at ways to extrapolate the total biomass, but I don't have the numbers with me. It would be important to have that. With regards to another species, the goldfish, you say that goldfish eat between 160 and 221 million tons of shrimp and have done so over the past 2 years. Is that the case? Again, I unfortunately don't have that data from the region of Quebec in front of me, but goldfish is a significant predator, and we have seen more of it in the past few years. Very well. So in 2021, 160 million tons that the goldfish has eaten, and in 2021, there was 18 million tons of shrimp. I'm just questioning the process. The math was not my favorite subject when I was a kid, but if the goldfish is eating 168 million tons of shrimp and the numbers are lower for shrimp, well, how can we expect the numbers of shrimp to increase? I just want to understand how you assess that if a goldfish is eating so much shrimp and we're decreasing quotas, how are we going to increase the health of that second species of shrimp? So when there's pressure on the stock that is natural or related to fishing, we take all of that into account in our scientific advice, and we offer advice that errs on the side of caution when there's pressure on the stock. You mentioned predation from goldfish. That is a significant factor. There's also the increased temperature of the water that has been problematic for the past few years. And these conditions are not going to improve in the short term. So our scientific advice did indeed take into account those parameters. So you understand that the numbers are a little questionable.
Time. We'll now go to Madame Debienne for 6 minutes or less, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to ask our scientists what the process is to act on the field when you're sending ships out to measure resources. How do you proceed? Just quickly, to give me an idea of real life, how things happen on the field. Is there any of you that might be able to respond? Yes, thank you for the question. There are many methods done to assess things. We work with vessels, and we also use cameras, underwater cameras, to examine salmon, for example, in rivers. So there are different methods that are used in order to collect data that is integrated into our scientific advice. So going back to what Mr. Cormier said, Mr. Chair, I would like to ask the witnesses, is there regular communication between the Department of Fisheries and Oceans and the Department of the Environment for climate change, for example? Is there any foreseeability? Do your scientists communicate with the other department? Answer, yes. We work in collaboration with different departments, but specifically with the Department of Environment for modelization of the impact of climate change and oceans. So we do examine their forecasts as well. So herring and mackerel, there is a natural mortality of 60% that is caused by seal predation. Do you have an analysis of what you're going to do with these pinnipeds? What are the possibilities for decreasing predation of those two species? Thank you for the question. In every case, we assess the causes for the trajectories of stock, whether it be fisheries or other. In many cases, we have noticed that natural mortality, including for predation, is an important factor. In many cases, even though there was an increase of certain pinnipeds, we don't see it as a predominant factor for foreseeing fish stocks. There are also logistical constraints looking at the management of pinniped species.
Ouais, j'ai plus de temps, hein? Je sais encore.
I think I'm out of time. Am I out of time? 3 seconds? Inaudible. We seem to have plenty of time today. That's great. Okay, so there must be different ways to assess resources. For example, different species, lobster. Do you have other teams that are able to assess things? When you communicate with fishers, for example, do you communicate frequently with them, or is it on occasion? How do you factor them in when you're conducting studies? Thank you for the question. We have significant collaboration with fishers. We do data collection with the industry that send us samples. They participate in sampling, and we have the peer-reviewed assessments. We invite them to participate, and we are able to examine the methods that were used. Are your observations, do they correlate well with what's seen on the field, or do you often have opposing views? Answer: it could happen that there are noticeable differences between the scientific review, the peer review, and on the field, not because it's not well done, but because we need models to be able to interpret observations, and often we see that for fishing there can be higher numbers for species in certain areas, but when we look at the biomass in the zone that's being examined, well, in certain cases the stock can be decreasing.
At the end, that was exactly on your time. We'll now go to Ms. Barron for 6 minutes or less, please.
Thank you, Chair. Set my timer as well. Big thank you to all of those who are here today, all the witnesses and all those from the science sector. it's great to have you all here and to learn more about the work that you're doing that's vital to our ability to be part of sound decision making and so on, or to ensure sound decision making is being done. My questions, I have many, but one in particular, I was hoping to find out a little bit more from Dr. Miller-Saunders. And Dr. Miller-Saunders, I know, was here at DFO prior to my time getting elected as a Member of Parliament, and appreciated reading the information that was presented at that time. And I'm wondering now, with the report that was published in March, that was initially written, of course, in 2012 around the PRV found in BC's open net fish farms. I'm wondering if we could learn a little bit more now that this report has been released around the importance of this knowledge having been presented in a timely manner, and maybe some more information around what happened in that delay.
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. The study took place in 2012, and a report was prepared in that same year. The delay was due to a disagreement between myself and the industry vets on the interpretation of the science. And that delay has continued for 10 years because apparently there needs to be an agreement on the interpretation of the science before the report can be put in or before a manuscript can be prepared. And that is perpetual over the last 10 years, despite the fact that the agreement is no longer active. So I'm sorry, what was your specific question?
Just expanding on that a little bit. So I'm trying to understand the process that was taken that resulted in a 10-year span of us not seeing the results of the science that was conducted by yourself that was presented in 2012.
The importance of that study was it was the first study to document the presence of PRV in the Pacific Northwest, in salmon in the Pacific Northwest. It definitely could have informed a lot of the work moving forward. However, subsequent to that, there was other study by other groups on that particular virus, and my own program continued to work with different sets of samples to better understand the potential of that virus to cause disease and the prevalence of the virus in our natural wild populations. Our work has shown that the virus is likely capable of causing disease in both Chinook salmon and in Atlantic salmon. The same kinds of disease processes that we see in other parts of the world have been seen in our salmon in aquaculture in British Columbia, and we do see some of the similar types of pathological changes in our wild Chinook salmon populations. Recently, we have a paper coming out that shows PRV is one of the agents most strongly associated with population level impacts in Chinook and coho salmon.
Thank you very much, Dr. Miller-Saunders. That sounds like some really vital information for us to have and to understand and to be able to use in decisions around how to best move forward with fish farms. So I appreciate that information. This is, this story, you mentioned around the process here, and I wanted to share a little bit around what Bob Chamberlain shared around the CSAS process. Specifically, he said that basically at every step of the way in the process, in the steering committee, in the terms of reference, in the discussion paper, the peer review process, there was an unduly influence by industry as they can select who will participate in the peer review process. So basically, I'm being confusing, but I'm wondering if you can share a little bit around whether you agree or not that the process that we have in place currently can impede our ability to access timely scientific information when we have a peer review process that is heavily weighted by industry and perhaps those who may have a conflicting, may have conflict in the future of the decisions that are being made.
I think that question is directed to me. Yes, I think my comments on this have been made publicly previously, that I have had concerns over the inclusion or control of these kind of processes by industry. However, there is now a new conflict of interest document that goes with the CSAS process, and I am hoping that that may resolve some of those issues into the future. That only came out in 2021.
Thank you, Ms. Byron. There's only about 8 seconds left, so you probably wouldn't even get in a question, let alone an answer. Before I go to Mr. Arnold, I just want to check in with our witnesses to make sure they're okay with staying a while longer where we lost the time earlier. I know I mentioned it that we'd get our full time, but I didn't take into account your schedules at that time. So I hope that's still okay. Okay, I'm seeing nodding. We'll now go to Mr. Arnold for 5 minutes or less, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the witnesses for being here today on this study that I put forward for the committee. I want to start off with Ms. LeBlanc, if I could. And Ms. LeBlanc, you made several statements in your letter to the Deputy Minister, Timothy Sargent, last November. My recollection is that you gave examples of scientific advice that was meddled with after it had passed through the scientific peer review. You've stated today that here as a representative of DFO, you're not able to comment on that. I believe that you were invited as a witness, as a member of the Professional Institute of Public Service of Canada. If we were to invite you back as a representative of that organization, would you be able to comment and give answers regarding that those comments you made?
Merci pour la question, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you for the question. In the current context, I was invited as a member of DFO, as an advisor, and in another context, we'd have to discuss this with the Professional Institute to see who would be able to testify. Unfortunately, today I cannot give any information on the situation.
Okay, thank you. I will switch my questions now to Dr. Miller-Saunders, if I could. Doctor, over the years, how has your scientific work and reports been received by the scientific or the international scientific community versus Canadian science community versus DFO? Have there been differences in how your work and reports have been received in those different communities?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. Yes, there is a vast difference in how my research has been taken by both by the department compared to how it's been taken internationally. I'm repeatedly asked to collaborate on international studies that employ the kinds of technological approaches that I have employed and developed while as a scientist in Canada working for Fisheries and Oceans. And it's fairly rare that I've been asked to employ those technologies within my department. I do collaborate extensively with universities, with Pacific Salmon Foundation, with affiliates in Norway and in other parts of Europe, as well as the US. So it has been a frustration, I have to say, in my scientific career to be much less valued in my own department than I am internationally.
Thank you for that. A federal court decision last Friday set aside the government's Discovery Islands decision that was issued in December of 2020. That decision issued without scientific reasons. In your opinion, was there or is there a scientific basis for the Discovery Islands decision announced in December 2020?
Well, I'm not privy to the information that the minister would have been provided with that, so I really can't speak to, the basis of how she made her decision. Certainly, the Strategic Salmon Health Initiative, which I co-led with Dr. Brian Riddle at Pacific Salmon Foundation, has identified specific evidence that would suggest that at least two pathogens, Piscium orthoreovirus and Tenacibaculum maritimum, may pose more than a minimal risk, but both of those agents were part of a CSAS process that did declare that there was a consensus decision with very high uncertainty of no more than a minimal risk. However, we have two papers coming out which should bring to light some new evidence that needs to be reconsidered when it comes to that risk assessment.
Okay, thank you. And again, for you, Dr. Miller Saunders, why do you think the Discovery Islands decision was announced without scientific reasons to support it?
I can only guess that the science that was provided to the minister would be the 7 CSAS documents, reports that were prepared that all declared no more than a minimal risk with a high degree of uncertainty. And so based on those assessments, there would likely be no reason to suggest that there was a scientific basis.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Arnold. You're right on your time, just a little over. We'll now go to Mr. Hardy for 5 minutes or less, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the witnesses for attending. I want to talk about the terms of reference that would be in place when a study is done, when science is brought in. Who actually sets the terms of reference, the scope of the study? Perhaps Mr. Vigneault, we'll start with you on that one.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, for the question. I assume the member is referring to the peer review advice rather than the actual research project for the peer reviews.
No, I'm not talking about the peer review. I'm talking about who decides what the scientists in your group will study and who decides the scope and nature of the study. And I do have the Discovery Islands work in mind when I asked this question. But if your scientists are assigned to do something, who sets the parameters of the study?
Thank you for the clarification, Mr. Chair. So for the parameters of the scientific study itself, the proposal, that's are led and decided by the research scientists and the scientists of the department. What is set for for the management of science is the priorities that we would like to address through research proposal or monitoring proposal. Some of the priority comes from specific proposal to the government of Canada, like the investment in the science to support the fish stock provision. We have a bit more flexibility within the existing envelope, so we try to adjust the priority in consultation with our client stakeholder and communicate that to the research committee, and they in turn develop the proposal that will support the initiation of a research studies.
Now, you indicated earlier, and it was a comment you made, that you're looking for the science to support the decision. Isn't that kind of getting it backwards? A decision needs to have some science behind it, but the way you framed it sounded like, here's the decision, now let's go find the science to support the decision. Clearly that couldn't be the case, right?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The idea is that we prioritize our work. The type of science endeavor we do is targeted at answering specific question or management objective Like the easy example that we're all familiar is for the fish stock assessment, when we know that on a regular basis we have to reassess the health of the stock and provide scientific evidence for the management to articulate a proposition. So that's what I mean. It's not that we derive everything that we do from specific decision. It's generally speaking, it's from the sum of all our monitoring research endeavor that gets integrated into specific science advice that are peer reviewed. That's the basically end goal of most of our science activities.
I want to go back to the Discovery Islands work that was done, and I guess this would be a question for Dr. Miller-Saunders. They were presented with a high level of uncertainty. And I'm asking you for an opinion here. Would this not then really put big bright lights on the principle of the precautionary principle, that if there's a high degree of uncertainty, that we should err on the side of protecting wild stocks, because it doesn't appear to have happened here?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. Uncertainty is a means to reflect incomplete scientific information or scientific studies or interpretations that may contradict one another. When there's uncertainty, there's an expectation that policies will be more precautionary, especially in cases where there's a resource in crisis. Therefore, in cases where risk is determined to be minimal, but there's a high degree of uncertainty, there should be a strong motivation to both fill the knowledge gaps and reevaluate the assessment of risk upon receipt of new information. Until that time, and such time as uncertainty is now declared to be low, managers need to proceed with caution in putting a consensus judgment into action. So in short, yes, there is a need to apply the precautionary principle where there's a high degree of uncertainty.
Thank you, Mr. Hardy.
That...
Thank you, Mr. Hardy. Your time is up. We'll now go to Madame Debienne for 2.5 minutes, please.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a question for Ms. Saunders. In your research, is there only compilation of the observation of data, or is there a team that focuses on intervention to recuperate the resource, to reactivate it, to protect it, to have a bit of foreseeability if the resource is going to disappear? Do you work on both, please?
I do. My broader research program, a lot of my research focuses on work in wild organisms in their natural environment. However, we do bring certain questions into the lab, largely relating to the impact of stress on fish and the impacts of climate change. And so, we can show within a laboratory setting what amount of a given stressor may actually impose stress and may result in mortality in a lab. And we can go out and measure those kinds of effects in fish in the field. Most of my work, obviously, is currently known in the area of pathogens, but a lot of my program also looks at environmental stress and climate change. And we do use both a combination of laboratory study and field-based observations. It would be brilliant to be able to actually do large-scale manipulations in the field where one could manipulate a factor that you think may be causing mortality. This type of work has been done with sea lice in Europe, where they have prophylactically treated juvenile wild salmon. Yes.
Je vous arrêterai, Madame.
I'm going to interrupt you, Ms. Saunders, and ask, do you currently possess all the resources needed, material resources, the necessary budget, in order to carry out studies that are significant and that would have an important impact, or where you could raise alarm bells if needed?
Well, funding in the department is largely based on competitive proposals, but there is the new Pacific Salmon Strategy Initiative. I have not yet received any funding from that strategy, but I anticipate that hopefully I will. I fund my program principally through money outside of the department because I have better success in generating funds to do my research with outside granting agencies than I do inside the department. But I have published 55 peer-reviewed publications in the last 5 years. So I think my program and its the prolific nature of the science that we do is pretty well documented.
Thank you for that. We'll now go to Ms. Barron for 2.5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair. One question that I know I'm asking myself, and I'm sure many others are as well, actually I know they are, Dr. Miller-Saunders, I'm wondering if you could provide your opinion on how things could have been or would have been different if the results of your scientific report from 2012, if those results had been made available in a more timely way. What are your thoughts on what might have been different as a result?
Well, certainly the results of that study were made available within the department. Every piece of science that is done in my group is reported up through the chain. And if it potentially could impact policies or regulations. And so the department certainly knew even back in 2012 of those findings. Publicly, I mean, the findings of PRV were first put out by another group based on the findings in the IP and the findings in my group. So I wasn't able to publish the first discovery of PRV in Canada, nor was I able to really carry out a lot of new research in that area, certainly not with those particular samples. It's a hard question to ask. There has been a lot of research on that particular virus now. There have been laboratory challenge studies, which have been undertaken. There has been a lot of field studies, and now PRV has been tracked within the department for several years, both largely in cultured fish, but my program has tracked it in wild fish. So there is a mounting, weight of evidence of the impacts of PRV. It's really important to note that everywhere else in the world, PRV is known to be a disease agent, and all strains of PRV has been shown to be capable of causing disease in salmon, in Pacific salmon, and in Atlantic salmon. And the research from my lab would back up that international viewpoint. So I don't know. Hard to turn back the clock and know how things would have been different if that had been made public at the time. But I do think that significant inroads have been made since that time.
Thank you, Mr. Barron. Your time is up. We'll now go to Mr. Zimmer for 5 minutes or less, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I just want to, first of all, thank my colleague, Mr. Arnold, for putting this study forward. It's a very important study. It's a study of science at the Department of Fisheries and Oceans. So forgive my preamble, but it'll take a few minutes. I wanted to highlight another example that you may not have heard, a science-based proposal to have a brief opening to fish for hatchery Chinook in BC. Quote, modest science supported the Sport Fishing Advisory Board proposals were not approved due to undisclosed concerns. These previously undisclosed concerns were finally made known to the Sport Fishing Advisory Board post facto. So this is based on closures last year and hoping for an opening this year. Proposals have been put forward that address these new concerns in the Howe Sound Pacific Fisheries Management Area 28 in Southeast Vancouver Island, PFMAs 17, 18, and 19. Again, quote, these amended proposals, which were already ranked as low risk, provide even more protection for local and Fraser River stocks of concern. So far during the current integrated harvest planning process, senior DFO Pacific Region staff have informed the Sport Fishing Advisory Board they will not reopen the existing 2021-2022 salmon IFMP. The Sport Fishing Advisory Board has met the department's new information requirement, and the SFAB has substantially adjusted their proposals based on this new information. Yet, despite the minister promising to listen to the science-based proposal, we have recently heard the minister completely disregarded the science-based proposal. Question to Ms. LeBlanc and Ms. Miller-Saunders. Does it surprise you that the Minister for DFO disregards sound science? Yes or no?
I will respond, Mr. Chair. So I am a scientific advisor for DFO, and I assess research projects, but I also send advice to the department. And once that advice is given, well, decisions are made by management and not made by me. I have 26 years of experience in the department, and I know what my role is, and after that, it's up to somebody else.
Thank you.
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. I would echo the comments of Dr. LeBlanc in that our role as scientists is to provide the scientific information, not to make the policy. And so we have very little control or a limited amount of input into what science moves forward to the minister or to even upper managers in Ottawa and how they utilize that science.
So maybe I'll ask it one more time. Does it surprise you that the Minister for the Department of Fisheries and Oceans disregards sound science? Yes or no? Just a yes or no from each of you.
Not in my experience.
As a scientific advisor, my advice has to do with science. Other elements are part of the decision-making process.
I'll move on to question 2. And I've read the recent CBC article, January 24th, 2022, that quotes you, Ms. LeBlanc. A pattern of decisions and events has emerged that in the department that is causing scientists in the Newfoundland and Labrador region to have grave concerns about the current status and future direction of the department's science advice, science independence, scientific excellence, and integrity. Second question, how do you believe DFO should integrate science-based advice into their decision-making? A quick answer, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As I mentioned earlier, that letter was written in a different context than my role at the department, so I can't speak on that.
No, I'm asking, how do you believe DFO should integrate science-based advice into their decision-making? I quoted the article, but I'm asking you a specific question that doesn't necessarily relate to that previous paragraph. How do you believe DFO should integrate science-based advice into their decision-making?
Sorry, we're going to have to move on, Mr. Zimmer. Your time has gone over. We'll now go to Mr. Morrissey for 5 minutes or less, please.
Thank you, Chair. My question is to Dr. Vino. In reading your opening statements, you referenced use words like transparency, transparent, peer review as a vital component of the important challenge function that DFO science sector provides, and your reviews have included domestic, international, scientific experts from academia, indigenous communities, environmental, non-governmental organizations, industry experts. Dr. Vino, has DFO science ever got decisions in the past wrong based on the data that your own department is having? And I'm using that in relation. Various fisher organizations engage scientists. They do their own data. And how do you interpret the scientific information they're providing you versus what you're receiving from DFO scientific division? Dr. Vino?
Yeah, thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. Yes, by definition, the science process is an iterative process that makes an interpretation based on what's available at the time. We always make
Dr.
sure
Vino?
that we...
It's always
Yes.
an interpretation?
when we do a science advice, it's based on the data, and yes, you have to through the peer review process, the data is integrated. Include inputs from the industry, and we can, if there's new scientific information that's available, new data, that's being revised on a regular basis as need be from the biology of the species, or if there's fundamentally new information. A classic example of that is for several stocks, we were able to develop models that predict the trajectory of the stock. Those models use all the information that's available in the past to make the best output. Sometimes from year to year, that changed the forecast based on the latest scientific information that's available. But that's part of the science process. That's why the major stocks are reviewed on a regular basis through the peer review.
Okay, my question, your advice is provided to the minister in making decisions on quota, and it's always interesting when the decision is to increase the quota, everybody agrees with science. When the recommendation is to cut the quotas, that's when the different opinions come forward. Could you elaborate on the information that you received from fishers? You used, and I'm quoting you, but not directly, that you provide the fisher information. It goes as part of your briefing to the minister. Do you put an opinion in that as well on the fishers' advice you received or the data they received?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question. I was referring to the summary of the Fisheries Management-led Advisory Committee. So first, it's not science sector is not involved, and it's a neutral summary of the input that were received. When we provide the science advice, like the industry representative provide expertise to the peer review, and that's part of the consensus-based advice that's produced after the peer review process.
Maybe Mr. Hardy could answer this, or you, Dr. Vino, in a short time. Currently, we have two fisheries shut down in the Gulf region, mackerel fishery and the spring herring fishery. Are you confident that your information has no gaps in the data you had collected prior to making that recommendation to the minister? Are you confident that the information you have accurately reflects the state of the fishery?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. So yes, absolutely, we are confident in the level of rigor that was applied to both of those stocks in peer review process, in determining the state of the stock and providing that information to the minister based on the best available information. And in both those cases, industry information and contribution to those processes in terms of data, in terms of their views on the interpretation of the information is incorporated into our assessments and as part of the package that goes up to the minister.
Matty, because you won't have time now, the exact percentage, how much of the Gulf mackerel fishery and the spring herring fishery is used for commercial bait to support the lobster and crab fisheries in that area? I know you may not have it, but if you could provide that to the committee, it would be great. Could you do that?
Thank you for the question. I don't have that information at my disposition.
No, but the
right
department
now.
has it. You should be able to get that.
Thank you, Mr. Morrissey. Hopefully we'll get that provided in writing to the committee. We'll now go to Mr. Small for 5 minutes or less, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just got so many questions here. I don't know which questions are to ask them to, really. There's just so much. Yeah, so, and thank you to the witnesses for coming. I guess I'll start with Mr. Hardy because I've got quite a few friends who are fishers in the Gulf region. What's the status of the Gulf shrimp stock right now? Would you is it growing or declining?
Thank you for the question. Thank you for the question. Yes, Gulf shrimp have been declining over the last number of years, unfortunately.
How have you determined that?
There are a number of studies, and surveys to assess stocks. Also including, our DFO surveys, looking at size class, age composition, and everything else, looking at commercial catches and whatnot. All of this is integrated into an assessment model and into the various zones throughout the Gulf to produce an assessment for each of the zones. So for the most part, we have seen declines, although we we are still in the healthy zone in some of the zones. There are indications, as were mentioned previously, of predation and a downward trend.
Oh, I've been talking to some industry folks, and they've told me that our shrimp stock is actually growing, and maybe that's one of the healthy ones you're referring to. I'm not sure, but is it possible that you're cutting back that shrimp quota to feed the redfish?
Sorry, thank you for your question, first of all, but in terms of cutting back the quota, those are decisions that are made with respect to ensuring the sustainability of the fishery, right? And certainly predation from a number of factors, environmental change, are all factors that speak to how well a stock is doing. And with respect to the fisheries decisions, they're aimed at ensuring sustainability of the stock in the long term.
So why did you go beyond the preliminary approach and cut it by 20% when protocol would be maximum 15%?
With respect to if I understand the member's question, Mr. Chair, that's with respect to the harvest decision rules that are in place in the shrimp fishery. I think that's a management decision, and from a science point of view, our focus is on putting together the best available information from an assessment point of view, ensuring that the rules that have been developed are compliant with the ever-changing environmental conditions that are representative of what's going on in the environment.
Okay, so talking about assessments. Do you know how many fish species have their biomasses determined with the aid of acoustic surveys in Canada?
Thank you for the question. Offhand, I do not know that information.
Acoustic surveys for mackerel? Offhand,
I do not know the number of acoustic surveys that are conducted for mackerel.
So I'm a little example from other northern Atlantic countries like Iceland and Norway, where they put their capelin under moratorium in 2019, 2020. For some reason, I guess they couldn't find them acoustically, and then they went out and they found them somewhere where they weren't expecting them at all. And now they've got this gigantic capelin fishery coming this year of almost 900,000 tons, as I know you're well aware. Do you have any idea how Iceland can have these wide variations and why their conservation measures seem to work and our conservation measures don't, given that we prosecute between 1% and 10% of most biomasses? And these guys, they're doing 30, 40% of their biomass, but their fishery, their oceans are much more productive than ours. Anything to give to the committee? Any thoughts of yours why this could be happening?
Thank you for the question. That's a really broad question, and speaks to the changes that we're seeing in our environment. So I would say that just generally speaking, across all our pelagic fish in Atlantic Canada, specifically in the Gulf region, in the Gulf of St. Lawrence, we are seeing changes in environmental conditions happening quicker. That affects productivity, that affects recruitment, that affects the overall biomass. So certainly, it's to be expected that across the range for various pelagic species, from a north to south distribution and across the Atlantic, there can be localized differences. As how that relates to specific management measures that are applied between Canada or Iceland, I'm not familiar enough that I could speculate on whether those are impacting the overall trends.
Thank you, Mr. Small. We'll now go to Mr. Kellaway to finish up this part of our session today. 5 minutes or less.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and hello to my colleagues and to the witnesses. Thank you so much. The work you do has an impact on all of our communities, all of our rural communities, and the people that work within them. And I appreciate the efforts and the work that go into it. And we talked a lot today about technical peer review processes, and I think that's important. And we've also talked to a certain degree around industry consultation. And I have three questions if we can get through them. But that's my first question is focusing on how do we ensure that knowledge from industry stakeholders and Indigenous fishers and fish harvesters are part of the advice that goes to the minister? And I'll start with Mr. Vigneault on that.
So thank you very much, Mr. Chair, for the question. Yes, we ensure at different steps of the process. I mentioned earlier the collaboration with the industry stakeholders. There's also lots of collaboration ongoing with the Indigenous organization, right from the start into designing a research activity or collaborating with us on the surveying and data gathering. We invite them to participate in the peer review process so that they could provide their expertise to the discussion, inform the analysis of the data, and that's all being inputted into the science advice decision. Above and beyond that, there's other consideration that the minister have when making a decision that include the direct input from the Indigenous community, including the traditional knowledge and as well as industry input, as we mentioned earlier.
Okay, thanks very much. I'm wondering if we could do a little deeper dive on that last part in terms of what it looks like. So I'm wondering if you can provide the committee with information on the formal arrangements, Mr. Vigneault, the department has taken to include the voices of our hardworking fish harvesters. So basically, can you give us a short example, a quick example of what this looks like?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Member. There are a range of collaboration, including direct collaboration. There's some survey of the harvester are actually providing support for the science endeavor with compensation by collecting the actual sample data that's required for the assessment. They are also involved, as I mentioned, in the science advice, but also in the other steps of the process where we're involved. We work more and more into a management process where scenario or test against conservation objective. Industry is part of setting those objectives, setting the conditions around the modeling that we do. So they're also part of that science.
Okay, Mr. Vigneault, I think I probably have time for one more question. And you spoke in your introductory remarks about open science. So I'm wondering if you can provide the committee with some concrete examples. I'm big on concrete examples on how our government can leverage open data and science to increase a couple of things, Mr. Vigneault: transparency and building trust in government, while also creating an environment of innovation, but includes trust and collaboration with industry and First Nations.
Thank you for the question. Yeah, I think it's fundamental to have the science available to all so that they could look at it, contribute to it. The peer reviews, the CSAS, it's hundreds of advice that are published yearly on top of several hundred scientific publications. We have up to more than 450 data sets, including data that are used for a full range of decision-making, not just fishery, but the implementation of the Impact Assessment Acts and other. And there's many areas where we're using leading-edge technology to expand the amount of data. We're developing expertise in acoustic data, remote sensing data, genomic data, all that is made available to all that contributes to the science process.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Callaway, and I want to thank our witnesses for staying with us much longer than they had planned to address concerns of the committee members. We'll recess for a couple of minutes now just to allow our witnesses to sign off and our next session to begin and get the sound check done for the witness for that one. So thank you again, one and all. We're recessed for a moment. Our next witness, Dr. Mona Nimmer, Chief Science Advisor. The floor is yours now for your opening statement of 5 minutes or less, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and good afternoon. Good afternoon to you and all the members of the committee. I want to thank the committee for inviting me here today, and I welcome the committee's interest in science. Je suis ravie de l'intérêt que vous portez à la science. Science helps government decision makers gather data, analyze evidence, and assess different policy options and their impacts. Let me begin by briefing you about my office, our mandate, and some of the work we've done since my appointment in September 2017. Mon mandat consiste à fournir des conseils et des recommandations au gouvernement dans le but de favoriser l'atteinte de 3 objectifs clés. Premièrement, nous visons à ce que les travaux scientifiques du gouvernement soient entièrement accessibles au public et à ce que les scientifiques
Excuse me, Dr. Nimmer, we're not getting translation. I'll get that checked on just for a moment, please.
Okay.
You can't add no more time.
I'm sorry, Dr. Nemmer, could I ask you to say a sentence again, please?
Yes, certainly. Can you hear me?
Pourriez-vous nous donner une petite phrase en français, s'il te plaît?
Oui, bien sûr. Mon mandat consiste à fournir des conseils.
My mandate is to offer suggestions and advice to the government.
Okay, sounds good now, and we're getting the translation, so start off and where you left off, I guess, and continue on.
Okay, thank you. Mon mandat consiste à fournir.
My mandate is to offer advice and recommendations to the government in order to advance their 3 main objectives. 1, ensuring that government science is fully available to the public and that federal scientists are able to speak freely about their work. 2, improving the science advisory function within the federal government so that scientific analyses are considered when the government makes decisions. And 3, recommending ways for the government to better support quality scientific research within the federal system.
Last few years, I have had the opportunity to observe the interplay between science and policy making. And by science, I mean not just the physical and natural sciences, but the social and behavioral sciences as well. Here are some of my observations that relate to the work of this committee. First, it's crucial for federal government scientists to provide high-quality research that directly informs legislative, regulatory, or policy decision-making. For this reason, one of my office's first initiatives was the creation of a model scientific integrity policy, which has now been adopted by more than 20 federal departments and agencies, including DFO. The policy provides a framework laying out everyone's role in the conduct of high-quality science free of undue influence. The best science advice is based on high-quality, transparent research. Second, it's important for federal departments to have structured mechanisms for engaging and evaluating external research. That's because a great deal of relevant scientific expertise exists outside the federal government. Third, it's essential that the scientists and policymakers understand each other's imperatives. Scientists need to understand what evidence is relevant to the policy objectives at hand, and policymakers must understand both the benefits and the limits of what scientific evidence can provide. This is why my office, in collaboration with Health Canada, has developed an online self-directed course on effective science policy conversations. This course will soon be offered through the Canada School of the Public Service. In my capacity of advisor to the Prime Minister and Cabinet, I can be called upon to provide formal or informal science advice. For example, in 2018, the Ministers of Fisheries and Oceans asked me to lead an independent expert panel to provide recommendations on the appropriate use of scientific evidence in aquaculture decision-making. My office brought together experts from Canada and around the world to advise on the issue. Our publicly available report made a number of recommendations designed to improve science advice, scientific priority setting, and science communication. One of them was the appointment of a departmental science advisor at DFO. That recommendation was implemented, and I want to acknowledge the work done by DFO science advisor, Dr. Paul Snellgrove. It's my understanding that work continues on the several other recommendations from the experts panel report. Le rapport sur les sciences de l'aquaculture.
The aquaculture science report was one of the many pieces of scientific advice that my office has provided to the government during my 2 terms, and much of it has been in the past 2 years. The pandemic has shown us the importance of transparency in providing evidence and in decision-making, not only for creating better policies, but to maintain and build our trust in public institutions.
Use the lessons learned from the past 2 years to nurture a more scientifically literate society, as well as stronger and open institutions. Thank you.
Thank you for that. We'll now go to Mr. Perkins for 6 minutes or less, please.
Thank you, Dr. Is it Nimmer, am I saying? Nimmer?
Yeah, that's good. Thank you.
Thank you. So I was pleased to hear that you examine the quality of the science as well that's being provided to decision makers in the process. And I'm not sure how far, with all your responsibilities for science in the government, you get into the mud in terms of, or your team does, in terms of science such as those conducted by DFO. But I want to use, if I could, a recent example to understand how far your department may go down, or your agency may go down into science. The minister recently closed the Atlantic mackerel fishery, and it was based on, obviously, on the science, and which combined with the catch numbers on the decision form the basis of it. Over the last decade, would it surprise you that the spawning science that DFO is doing in the Gulf of St. Lawrence has moved to a week earlier in the month in June, further away from the peak period of spawning on June 24th? And all pelagic fish, especially on spawning and migration, are water dependent, and generally earlier on, when the science is being done, DFO is actually doing science on the spawning mass when the water is 2 degrees lower than when mackerel spawn. So they're doing it around 8 degrees Celsius rather than 10 to 13, and as a result, they're finding a smaller and smaller biomass. So it's sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy. And when you take out the results in the last decade of the sampling that they're doing in the water that is colder than when mackerel normally spawn, you get that when you eliminate that, you find that for the spawning mass is actually 48% from its high in the 1980s. But DFO is basing its decisions with that lower temperature in, which means that they're reporting that the biomass is only 5% of its peak in the 1980s, which then informs the minister's decision that the stock is in trouble, the fish, they're going out too early, and they're not finding it at the same spot. So would your department be looking into those kinds of things and analyzing whether or not the science quality is actually delivering what it should be doing?
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a complex question, but perhaps I should clarify that if I'm asked by the minister to provide direct advice on a question like this, my office certainly would. Generally speaking, we're not asked to provide this kind of evidence or sort of oversee that kind of details. But perhaps, to help, I can say that there are a number of evidences that are gathered as part of the science advice. One is, of course, observation. The other one is estimates. The third one is a pattern. And the fourth one is the sort of causal hypothesis, if you want. So all these need to factor in when we look at the completeness, if you want, and of the evidence and the quality of the science and the evidence that is presented.
Thank you for the answer. If I could switch to another area, marine protected areas. I'm sure you've been part of some of the international conferences where the government is promoting 25% by 2025 and 30% by 2030. I recently, in the last few months, attended a meeting, a consultation with the fishing industry in eastern Nova Scotia about the proposed marine refuge off the Scotian shelf. And DFO Science said that the reason that they were proposing this was to protect a particular type of coral, Grogarian coral, that exists on the edge of the shelf in that area where we have a very robust halibut fishery, and it would potentially mean the end of that halibut fishery with what's being proposed. When I asked the scientists if they had specific data on the level of coral development in that area over time, say the last decade, and whether it had been going higher or lower in that area, and if it had been depleting and being affected negatively, whether they could draw a direct cause to fishing, or could it be because of climate change or other issues of storms. They referred me to the science generally that they had, which I looked at, which had absolutely no science on that geographic area and was a general bit of science with regard to Grogarian coral and the effects of trawling, which isn't done in this area, and that type of thing. So I'm worried that DFO is proposing that we shut down large areas of our commercial fishery for this artificial goal in marine protected areas based on absolutely no science of the effect of fishing in these specific areas done in these areas by DFO.
Mr. Chair, I don't know if you wanted me to comment on this particular issue, which I can't because I'm not really aware of the details of this. I will say, however, that as part of our recommendations with respect to aquaculture, and it was strongly felt at the time that it would be a benefit to beyond aquaculture as well. We did the panel of experts recommended that DFO uses an integrated ecosystem approach. Because things, of course, happen differentially on our different coasts, and having an integrated approach allows the gathering of the relevant evidence around the entire system, and also the tracking, which is goes back to what I inferred to at the beginning in terms of both a pattern, observations, and fitting all this into really testable hypothesis.
Thank you, Mr. Perkins. We'll now go to Mr. Hanley for 6 minutes or less, please.
Thank you, and thank you, Dr. Nimmer, for appearing today. There was a time when this office didn't exist. It's relatively new, having been established, or at least re-established in 2017 by the Liberal government. So, in general, since taking office, where have you seen gaps in science informing policy, and how has your office attempted to correct this? And maybe it's a chance for you to elaborate on some of your initial comments.
Thank you for these questions. The office has been certainly very busy in the past 5 years, and certainly in the past 2 years with the pandemic. However, from the get-go, we saw our role as really looking at the horizontal issues and making recommendations for the enhancement of both the science advice and the science itself. And as part of this, I can't say that I did an audit of any particular department. I did visit many labs. I spoke with scientists, We looked into how research and science was being conducted. That's why one of the first things we did was to introduce the science integrity policy. And, for those who are not familiar, this is the equivalent really of a policy on the responsible conduct of research. That's something that exists in academic institutions. It's actually an obligation of both the institutions and the researchers who receive federal funding to comply with the responsible conduct of research. And it does delineate the role and the responsibility of both the employer and the employee in many ways, suggest ways to disclose, for example, conflict of interest, suggest ways by which people can talk about the research, about their science, without undue influence. So this is something that was very important. The second thing that we did as a follow-up, of course, to this was to propose a roadmap for open science. We've all seen during this pandemic the importance of open science, not only for the enhancing the trust of the public, but also for accelerating innovation, for accelerating the production, in this case, of diagnostics and preventive measures. So we proposed this roadmap, and we have worked with departments to achieve it, so that the science that is conducted by federal scientists is actually easily accessible, whether it's in the form of published reports, published manuscripts, or the data, the observational data part as well.
Thank you very much. That's very helpful. I wonder, I know you've mentioned the pandemic a few times, and we had many examples of really trying to act on emerging science. One could not always wait for peer review, let alone duplicate studies. So can you talk a little bit about how you see some learnings there from using emerging scientific findings that may not have time for peer review, but which may be important enough to change policy?
Yes, absolutely, and there are, there are well established standards, if you want, in terms of the quality of the science and the strength of the evidence. So, of course, ideally, we'd like to have the same findings being reproduced by others, being peer-reviewed, but under difficult circumstances and with a lot of uncertainties, people can determine whether the available science, the available evidence is of sufficient quality to be incorporated into decision making, and in the case that it's not, and that there is a void in the evidence anyway, it's then up to the policy makers, of course, to take the relevant course of action.
To take a slightly different tack, or maybe more focused, I heard some, have heard and read reports on the lack or relative lack of climate change analysis into fish stock estimates by DFO, and some of the. It sounds like there is some recent efforts and funding boosts in order to support better climate change analysis. But I wonder if you could comment on that particular area and the importance of modeling climate change effects into fish stock populations.
Mr. Chair, climate change definitely changes many of the environment, including, for example, the temperature of the water, the salinity, the acidity, etc. And this is why, again, as part of our recommendations, We did for the aquaculture at the time to DFO, we did recommend that an integrated risk management framework be adopted, and where specific inputs and variables are considered, and climate change would certainly be one of them. The consequences, that is, of climate change.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Hurley. We'll now go to Madame Debienne for 6 minutes, please.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to our witness. It's always very interesting to hear from you. Just to help us better understand, could you give me an example of an internal process to show the path of a request for information, for example, to support a legislation between your office and the minister's office? How do things work? Answer: usually, and I can give the example of aquaculture, the minister asked my office to offer recommendations on the use of science in aquaculture management. From that moment on, we're in discussion in order to find the right questions, because questions can be quite vast. So as soon as we've decided on the matter at hand, then we use scientific advice, assessment of the prioritization strategy of science, and scientific communication. From that moment on, then my office works independently to find experts in all of the relevant fields, whether it be in Canada or outside of Canada, and we start our work. That's what we've done, and we are working on a report that is being written by our office, and it's something that we will then send to the minister.
C'est ça?
Sorry? And is that report then made public? Answer: yes, the report is public. Perfect. And when you talked about finding experts, do you have any specific concerns for people on the field? Often we talk about Indigenous people or local stakeholders in fisheries. Are they systematically a part of your process? For example, for the Capeland, we had a emergency committee so that our minister could talk about that. Is this integrated in your process? Answer: I can assure you through the chair that we focus on diversity and inclusion, and we work with our experts and experts in the field, and we work with Indigenous people. We know that it is very important in all fields, but especially in our field and the field that we're talking about today, in fisheries, in health as well, which is something that we did in the past few years. Question: tell me, what concerns you most in your work? Is it climate change? Is it the lack of financial resources to do your work? Is it perhaps a lack of collaboration or communication? What is the most concerning thing for you right now? Answer: all of those issues that you raised are significant. With regards to what concerns me most for science and scientific advice, it's silos. The silos between the different sectors and our different institutions and our different departments. The issues are extremely complex, and the science is also complex. and it touches upon different fields. So it is important to break down the silos and ensure that there are no gaps in our knowledge, and we don't get that knowledge overnight. It takes time. So it needs to not find itself in no man's land. We need to have a good idea of the system so that we can develop things in advance, the research, the processes that need to be put in place to work on something. So you would like to be more efficient, is what you're saying, in the different fields of study. I wouldn't say efficiency in the way that we often hear talk about it for industrial productivity, but really that we want things to be exhaustive, complete, and there can't be any gaps with the different types of knowledge. Thank you.
To Ms. Barron for 6 minutes or less, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to Dr. Niemer for being here today. I wanted to gain an understanding of, we know we're seeing that there's the DFO scientists are doing a lot of good work, but we're seeing incidences where this good work isn't necessarily translating into policy. I think of, a couple of examples, or one example that we spoke about today was the P3 cod fishery, but also another one around the decisions made around the interior Fraser steelhead that was recently done. There's many examples that are coming up, and I'm wondering, in your position, do you track any incidences like this that's happening within specific departments?
Mr. Chair, it's an important question, and if I may, I want to clarify my position. My position is not one to evaluate the science that is taking place and by which it's being communicated to the government in each department. So I'm not like really an auditor or an ombudsperson. I have a more proactive function, if you want, to provide advice on how best to conduct the science and the science advice.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for clarifying. I guess I'm trying to understand, do you have the ability to to look at the different departments, see how they compare, see if there's, the functionality of the setup of the departments, if there's challenges or differences between? I'm just trying to understand how the way we do, or the way things are done, within DFO, if there are challenges that result as a result of the structure itself, and if you have any input on that.
It's certainly my hope, Mr. Chair, to highlight best practices and bring together communities of practices from different departments. In many ways, I look at the science workforce as a very important community within the community of the public service that would gain a lot from increased communications, which is why we're such champions of open science. We have created this kind of communities as part of the open science, as part of the tools that we are trying to develop right now to help scientists and policy in the various departments to evaluate the science and to put in place the best possible mechanism for science advice that's, of course, adapted to their realities.
We had Dr. Vignon that was here just prior to yourself, and he had in his speaking notes specifically some information around DFO having published more than 450 data sets to the open government portals, and all DFO science reports being open and accessible. And just further to your comment around sort of best practices, and I'm wondering what your thoughts are on Are you able to speak specifically to the data that's being made available through DFO and the timeliness and what that accessibility is like for within that site?
Well, thank you for this important question, because it's one thing to make the data and the science open. It's another to make it accessible, and it's yet another to make it easily findable, interoperable with other data that exist out there. And I will candidly say that this is an area where we have more work to do because of the siloed nature that I spoke to. It's sometimes difficult to find certain data sets and certain information that for sure exists out there, but you really need, if you're from sort of outside the government, to have some patience and to navigate your way until you find the data. And it is one of the projects that my office is now doing with the various science-based departments to create, if not one, but a smaller number of repositories for the data and for the scientific reports that would be easily accessible to the public.
Thank you. Now, I as best as you can you explain, so in the FOPO study that was done, now I'm a new member of Parliament, so of course I'm taking this information based on what I read and watched, but there was a FOPO study on the wild Pacific salmon. And in that study, there was a recommendation that was put forward to have the CSAS process more independent from DFO's work. And I know that this may or may not be unique to this department. I'm wondering if you can highlight some thoughts around that and any best practices that you might want to share.
Again, thank you, Mr. Chair, for this question. We, as part of our analysis of the aquaculture science, we took a good look at the CSIS process at DFO, and I have to say that it's certainly very good that this process exists to synthesize the science. However, we made a number of recommendations to make the process perhaps increase its efficiency, the transparency of the process itself, like how the topics are chosen, how the people, the experts are chosen as well, and how quickly and where the results of the CSIS process, whether it's a report or the synthesis sometimes of a symposium, are put. I have to say that I was pleased to see that they've introduced a conflict of interest requirement, which is extremely important. It's not that you can't have people that come from industry or from other countries or other departments or even the same department, but any perceived or real conflict of interest needs to be disclosed, and that's best practice.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Byrne. We'll now go to Mr. Arnold for 5 minutes or less, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Dr. Niemer, in 2018, you led an independent expert panel on aquaculture science in producing a report that made a number of recommendations. Have you had any follow-up with DFO or the fisheries ministers since 2018? And have those recommendations been fully implemented? And do you feel there's been time that those recommendations should have been implemented by now?
Thank you very much for the question. One key recommendation from this report was the creation of the position of a departmental science advisor, an independent departmental science advisor, and that was done. And as part the department science advisor role exists in other government departments as well now. This is something that I'd like to see more generalized, and they become part of the network with the chief science advisor, that is myself, so that we can keep actually track of what's happening in departments, and we can help each other's. And I have
Thank you.
remained.
That's one piece that's been done, but the other recommendations from that, specifically that quantitative methodologies and risk science approaches be developed, have those recommendations been followed through?
I must say that I have not looked in detail, but I do believe that a number of them are still outstanding.
Thank you. That raises further question. Then it appears you are asked to find sources of science to provide information and advice. Is your part of your role to follow up to make sure that that science was efficient or answered the questions that were actually asked in the first place? Is that part of your role or your office's role?
Mr. Chair, again, it's not a part of my role and mandate to follow up on what's been implemented in the various departments. Of course, if should the minister wish that my office looks into it, we would do so.
Okay, thank you. When you were first appointed Chief Science Advisor in 2018, the federal government put out a news release and stated you will provide impartial advice to the Prime Minister and the Minister of Science. 2 years later, the Prime Minister issued a campaign promise to develop a plan to transition open net pen salmon farms in BC to closed containment by 2025. Did you provide, or are you aware whether science advice was provided, either formally or informally? As you indicated earlier today, that's how you provide information, is formally and informally. So did you provide, or was other scientific advice provided to the Prime Minister for his decision to make this commitment?
Mr. Chair, I believe that the departments are also tasked with providing science advice to the minister and to the Prime Minister, certainly in areas that are of their jurisdictions. And of course, it's not my role to look into whether this advice has been provided or not.
Okay, thank you for that. It came out in testimony earlier today that the CSAS process is a peer review process, and that the participants participate as objective experts to complete the peer review of science under consideration. Could you provide in writing, I think that we would need to do it in writing because of time constraints, what level of science expertise the participants in the CSAS process actually possess? How many of them have a science background? How many of them have a management background that does not include science training? Would you be able to provide that to us?
Mr. Chair, I certainly would be able to provide this after this appearance, because I would need, of course, to look at the biographies of the members of the CSAS committee.
Thank you. That would be appreciated, because we have heard anecdotally that there may not be a true science background in some of the people that are involved in the process, and that would certainly seem contradictory to the point of being a peer review process. So I think my time is up. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Arnold. We'll now go to Mr. Hardy for 5 minutes or less, please, to close out.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Dr. Neimer, is it safe to say that your mandate is to see that good science is conducted and reported objectively and free of undue influence? Is that really kind of the core of what you're there to do?
Mr. Chair, it is my mandate to make recommendations so that science quality is there and enhanced and increased, and that proper science advice is provided.
Listening especially to Dr. Miller-Saunders talk about work that she did that was basically suppressed for a period of time that could have better informed, the decisions around the Discovery Islands, but it required a consensus with industry. So it would appear that the scientists at the DFO are captive both to the DFO and to the industry. Does that trouble you?
Mr. Chair, perhaps it would be of benefit for me to explain how science publications and manuscripts come about. Usually there are a number of the researchers who have done the work, who are the authors and the co-authors, who would write the results of their study. This is when it's submitted to a scientific journal. It goes out for peer review, and it's either accepted as is, requires additional changes, informations, etc. Now, as this is the usual process, and in many institutions, universities, private sector.
I'm sorry, ma'am. I'll have to ask you to keep your answer fairly short, or to follow up maybe with something in writing. That would be most useful to us because this is important. Are you empowered when you're giving advice to Cabinet and to the Prime Minister to recommend changes to the regime being used for science at the DFO?
Mr. Chair, I am certainly empowered to provide recommendations, and I suppose the government can then, use the recommendations as they see fit.
You were complimentary of the creation of a position of science advisor, but again, going back to Dr. Miller-Saunders' experience, do we also need a science ombudsman?
The science integrity policy is meant to put in place the proper frameworks for the responsible conduct of research, including the ability of the scientists to publish their work without undue influence. So in many ways, this exists or has now existed for the past couple of years, but not before.
I'm quoting you were saying, you were talking about science adapted to reality. Is that really the job of scientists, to adapt whatever they find to whatever reality, or is that an interpretation that's best left to the people further down the food chain, if you will, in the policy making and decision process?
Mr. Chair, I don't believe I have used the word of the science adapted to reality. If I did, I apologize for it, because it's not that science adapts to reality. Perhaps if we talk about the models, they need to take into consideration the various elements that are relevant to the question that is at hand, or the subject that is at hand. It's certainly not the role of science to adapt to a reality. Science needs to examine the state of what's happening around us, including in an adaptive manner, taking into account changes in science and changes in the inputs into that particular science.
Do I have much time left, Mr. Chair?
No, not really. I'm going to cut you off right here, Mr. Hardy.
Well, there you go. Thank you.
I want to say a big thank you to Dr. Nimmer for appearing today, and for her patience for sticking around when we were having technical difficulties at the first hour of our session, and it delayed us getting to you. So we do appreciate you doing that, and for your appearance here today. So with that, I'll say meeting adjourned, and we'll see everybody at QP.